Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini, and as always, I'd like to thank you, my listeners, for tuning in as you have been faithfully doing for, I think I'm going on, got to be about close to 2 years. We're getting there. Actually, we're over 2 years now, so I have been doing this a long time, and so far, no calls from the FCC, so I must be doing something right. With that being said, I always want to thank my listeners from all over the world. It is an incredible honor to have folks literally tuning in from all four corners of the globe to this little old show being recorded out of Pittsburgh. So I appreciate you all doing that. Appreciate you taking your time. And as always, I try to find very good guests for you. But before I jump into this guest, this is a little bit of a repeat guest, but we had some unfinished business that I definitely wanted to dive a little more into. But I think it's going to be a good conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it. But as a friendly reminder, if you have not seen the documentary Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, it is available on Amazon. You can rent it or buy it, and I encourage you to do it ideally sooner rather than later. Help us welcome the families back for the 80-year anniversary in September. So please go check out the documentary Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, available on Amazon. Also, honorary consulate business. I always got to talk a little administrivia. As everyone knows, I am the honorary consular for the Italian government here in Pittsburgh. I am a volunteer. I don't get paid, but I do try and maintain regular office hours. Typically, you can get a hold of me Mondays and Fridays. That's when I'm answering the phone, checking emails, or typically actually in the office. During the week, it's more or less as I have time. So I want people to know that if they need to get a hold of me, your best bet is either Monday or Friday. So done with the administrivia. No more administrivia. Let's jump right into the show because that's what you're here for. You're here for the guests. And I have a repeat coming back, but a very good story. And obviously his relation and work with other folks is not to be underappreciated because while he comes from a very famous family, he himself is also very successful. And I want to celebrate him as well as talk about some of the other stories. So once again, if you could help me in welcoming back Samuele Bozzolla. Samuel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here with you. Thursday is my birthday, by the way.
Oh, happy birthday. Buon compleanno.
Grazie. Okay, so yeah. I was going to, I was thinking of a few things to tell you about my history or my background. One of the things that just came to mind when you were talking about the World War II is that my father, who lived at the time of the war, he was 12 years old, lived in right outside of Bologna in northern Italy. And one day, late, I guess it was pretty late in 44, there was a bang on the door. It was a farmhouse. My grandmother went to answer, and it was Germans. And they said, "We're here. We're going to take possession of your house, and all of you are going to live in that room, and we're going to take the rest of the house." So they lived there for 9 months with the Germans, who were going back and forth to the front as the Allies were coming up from Anzio down near Rome. They were coming up that way, and my father's task was to every morning he'd get up and he had to go into the gun shop and take bullets and put them into the cartridges for them to use later in the day when they would go and fight the fight. And in the evenings, interesting enough, they all sat around the table eating, and my grandmother would cook for these. There were about 9 or 10 of these soldiers. And my father said that he remembers them a lot of times crying because they started singing songs and reminded them of their mothers or girlfriends, because most of these soldiers were, 18, 19, 20 years old. So that went on for 9 months. And then one morning they said, in very bad Italian, and at that point, I guess my grandfather and grandmother learned some German. They said, "We're leaving because the Allies are coming, and we're going up towards Bologna." So they left. That night, around midnight, 3 of them came back with a large kind of makeshift tractor, loaded up a bunch of things that my father and his family had, and they drove them back to Bologna. The next day, the house was leveled by Ally fire. So I guess the moral of the story is they were saved by the Germans. So, war is war, but, not everybody is bad. I just saw him. He had vivid memories of everything. I mean, he went into vivid stories of what transpired those days. So I just thought that was interesting story for you.
No, you know what? That's funny you say that. That is a fantastic segue because, you know, I don't want to go back to the documentary, but what you find is at the end of the day, these are just people. Yes,
Yeah.
there were fanatics. But you know what? There were kind of fanatics on both sides. But obviously, when you're the victor, you get to rewrite, you know, or I should say rewrite, but you get to decide what history will be.
Sure.
The average person on the front lines is probably not a fanatic once the first shots start getting fired. They're just survival mode, save their friends.
Yeah, I mean, they're there because they have to be there. Just like, you know, they're drafted.
They're the pawns.
They're the pawns. And as I said, at night, these kids, you know, my father said they'd cry because they were thinking of their, you know, homeland. And
they absolutely didn't want to be there, right? And there's a good chance they're probably going to get killed anyway. So then now they, you know, what's the likelihood they're even going to get home? But it's funny because I'm going to film another documentary this summer, and I'm going over to Brooks, and I'm going to be working with a lot of those regions that were leveled. And ironically enough, the Allies seem to have done more damage than the Germans.
In a way, I think they you know, when they were bombing, I remember my father, because then when they went back to Bologna, there was a crucial train station there in Bologna, because it kind of from Bologna you can go to Venice, to Florence, to Milan. As a matter of fact, anytime you go from Florence to Venice or Florence to Milan, you always have to go through Bologna. It's like one of those stopovers. But anyway, he said that the Allies would try to bomb that every day and never hit it. But it hit everything else, but never hit the train station. So they leveled half of Bologna, but they never leveled the train station.
The actual target. Yeah, that's the problem with the bombing back then, is you had to drop tons of bombs and hope a percentage of them actually hit the target. In the meantime, the civilians are getting walloped.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you know, when the war was over, 3 of these soldiers came back and visited them, and they became friends. I mean, they were back there and had dinner together in the mid to late 40s. And
so they survived the war then. That's pretty interesting.
Those Germans survived the war. They went back and they came back. Yeah, so and again, I mean, there's all kinds of stories my father told me, you know, in his lifetime, because you know, when the war started, he was 10, and by the time he was, you know, he was born in 32, so he was about 9 or 10. And so he for some reason he has vivid memories of all the things that had happened. One other story I'll tell you, which is interesting. When the Americans came in to Bologna, they had so much extra surplus food that every day they'd go to the Bologna soccer stadium, which is 60 by 120 yards. They would line up with tables and put food down for all the people of Bologna every day. That's how much surplus food they had that they could do that.
You know, the irony is even today, there's, you know, we talk about, you know, famines and starvation, but the truth of the matter is the food is there.
Yes.
There's enough food on the globe to feed the people on the globe.
It's just a matter of getting it there.
Right. It's either logistics or war or, you know, oppressive. It's keeping the food out of the people that truly need it. But there's definitely enough food to feed the world. Even though,
for sure. Yeah.
So, let's kind of go back to some of the, because this is kind of interesting, because again, this is more defining, you know, people are people, and we can't always just put everyone in one bucket and say these were the bad guys and they were all bad, and these were the good guys and they were all good, because we know that's not true.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, if those 3 hadn't gone back, I wouldn't be here today, because my father would have died. Because, you know, the Allies started shelling and they just hit the house.
Whatever they could hit, they were hitting, because they figured, hey, there's a house, somebody's in it, probably bad, just blow it up.
Right.
Well, you know, it's funny because the Monte Cassino was another good example. You know, this fabled, you know, monastery, and it's the Allies that leveled it. And the irony is when they leveled it, they made it even harder to take it, because now they gave a bunch of ruins for people to, you know, to hide in. So we did a lot of damage with the bombing.
Yeah, everybody did.
Right.
That's what, unfortunately, that's why it's called war, you know.
That's right. Well, no, that's absolutely right.
I just found those stories interesting that my father would tell at the dinner table many nights. And when he would tell them, it was interesting. It seemed as though it happened yesterday to him.
Well, I tell you what, things like that when you're a child, I think they leave a lasting impact. Yeah. And I think they get, because I'm the same way. I have certain memories, and they're usually not good memories, that are etched in my brain, you know, things that happened over your life, and you say, I remember that, or maybe good memories, you know, and it's just the way our brain works. But I did want to kind of, you're telling these stories, do you ever write them down?
Yeah, I have some. Yeah, I've written them down. Sure, yeah, yeah. Because I've had. I mean, besides that, I've had other encounters in my days. I mean, one other thing I could talk to you about is I had the distinct pleasure, and I mean distinct pleasure, of spending many hours with Luciano Pavarotti.
Right.
And I got to know the man, not the artist, as much. Or I got to know both. Most people see him on stage, they clap, and then they leave. I got to go behind the scenes and spend the time with him. And I'll tell you, it was a very, very interesting experience I had, and just to see how he was as a person. I mean, first of all, he wherever he was singing, at the Metropolitan Opera, La Scala in Milano, or in a little town in Topeka, Kansas, he always gave 120%. That was amazing to me, because I said I was brought up in the world of opera, and I've seen hundreds of operas in my days, but to see an artist perform 120% every time he went on that stage, no matter what, it was unbelievable. And he was a real prankster. He would joke around with my father. I remember one night we went back to his apartment in New York after he sang, I think it was Rigoletto, and he opened a door and he had this panettone that he cut in half, put whipped cream in the middle, and he's just eating it just like a sandwich. He says, "I'm hungry after I perform," and of course he was from Modena, and my father was from Bologna, so they knew each other as they grew up. But then they reconnected through my mother.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did they actually? I don't think I remember. How did they actually meet?
My mother contacted him in '75 because she wanted him to come to Pittsburgh to do a recital. And so she told him who she was, and then, one thing led to another. And actually, they brought him here 3 times, in '76, '78, and '81. Just saying, the last time in '81, he sang with the Pittsburgh Symphony and full orchestra. The first 2 concerts, they were at Carnegie Hall in Oakland, and it was with piano. But believe it or not, in '76, my father had to give away over 400 tickets because he was not selling.
You know what? I was going to ask you that, because it seemed like, I don't know if it was the '80s, the '90s, when all of a sudden everybody kind of had this opera fetish and everybody was into opera, and obviously he was the guy.
Well, I mean, he came, but when he came in '76, he didn't sell out, so my father had to sell, give away tickets. Right. And then in '78, he called my father 2 weeks before. He said, my father's name was Rolando. He said, "Rolando," of course in Italian. He said to him, "When I come, that hall has to be sold out, because I am being followed by Newsweek magazine." Because as a matter of fact, a couple weeks after he sang here, they came out with the famous front page article, "The King of the High Seas." And so he said, "I need that hall filled, otherwise I'm not coming." And so my father, sold out. He struggled a little bit, but he sold out. And interestingly enough, that was in '78. In '81, when he came to Heinz Hall, which I think holds 2,800 seats, he had over 15,000 requests.
Wow.
In 3 years' time, it went from hardly, trying to sell out to having 15,000 extra requests for tickets, because people were just, were completely insane over him.
Yeah, it seemed like all of a sudden he just blew up, and it was like you couldn't get enough of him.
When that Newsweek came out, and he was on 60 Minutes,
right.
and then he had that charm that with him, and then he had that. He came up with that thing like Louis Armstrong with the handkerchief that he would go out on stage, and whenever he was done singing an aria, he would put the handkerchief out in his hand and hold me. And his famous aria "Nessun Dorma" from Turandot. That's what he usually finished his recitals with, which always brought the house down. I remember one I think it was in San Francisco. I saw him in the recital. I think at the end they gave him a standing ovation for like 12 minutes. I mean, clapping for 12 minutes. That's a long time if you think about it.
No, that's funny. So he didn't do the James Brown thing then, where they would come out and put a coat on him and he'd walk away and then they'd take the coat off. No.
Well, he might have done that. Late in life, he did that Pavarotti and Friends, and I think he sang with every person, every famous, and I think James Brown was one of them.
Yeah, well, because I know he did a lot of, like, I don't know. I don't want to say weird and native, but there were definitely some, like, how does this go together? But it made it work.
Yeah, he sang with Bono, with James Brown. He sang Celine Dion, I believe. He sang with most of those people. But going back to him as a person, he was just he was very generous. He didn't live a big time, like people think people like that live in these opulent homes. No, not really. He had a summer home in Pesaro, which is on the Adriatic, which was just a normal, house. And then in Modena, he just had almost like a farmhouse. He loved horses, so he had a few horses there, but nothing like these mansions you see from some of these people in Hollywood. No, he was just a regular person, and he always kind of stayed a regular person. But his artistry was amazing. I mean, the way he sang, the way, because again, when you sing opera, my mother always said, you can be a good opera singer and you can be a great opera singer. And the difference is a good opera singer is the person that sings opera. The great opera singer is the person that sings opera and understands what he's singing about.
Ain't that the truth? In fact, you know what? So, I do want to talk about your mother here in a second, but I'm gonna break for a commercial, but I want to come back because she too, has had a good career and actually had a very good influence in the community at large. So we're going to talk about your mother as soon as we get back, right after these messages. The San Rocco Foundation will be celebrating their 100th celebration. Our celebration will be August 8th, 9th, and 10th at St. Francis Cabrini Parish Campus, Mary Queen of Saints. Events start at 4 p.m. each day. On Sunday, August 10th, Mass will begin at 9 a.m. at St. Titus Church in Aliquippa. There will be a procession immediately following. For more information, check out their website at www.sanroccofoundation.org. Again, that's www.sanroccofoundation.org.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. Did your parents or grandparents ever talk about the Vietnam War? The Hardest Year, a love story and letters during the Vietnam War, is an accurate portrayal of what life was like during the 1960s, a time of the draft, equal rights, and the anti-war movement. Follow newlyweds through their letters as they navigate 1 year of the war an ocean apart. The Hardest Year by Carol and William Wagner is available now wherever books are sold. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. Hello, Bucco fans. This is Steve Stefano Mancini, international award-winning filmmaker and host of the award-winning Italian Impact podcast. Join us in celebrating the Italian community on August 23rd as the Pirates take on the Colorado Rockies. This special offer includes an exclusive Pirates co-branded Italian hat and loaded value, good to use on concessions and merchandise on the day of the game. Also, a portion of each ticket will be donated to a local Italian charity. So come experience a unique blend of sports, culture, and community during Italian Heritage Night at PNC Park. Grazie, ci vediamo. All right, welcome back. All right, I'm joined by Sam Bozzolla, who has been a previous guest, and he was very kind and gracious to come back because we have a lot of stories. I mean, Sam, putting your life aside, which is again very interesting, you know, your relationship with Luciano Pavarotti, your mother also, you know, has her own career. Obviously, your grandfather had a career. Yeah. So let's talk about your mother a little more. Now, I know we brought her up.
my mother sang, she had about a 10-year career starting in 46. She debuted at the Met in 1947 with her father, my grandfather, in Faust. And then she sang in San Francisco, Philadelphia, and other opera houses in this country. Then she went to Europe, did some singing there. But interesting enough, in 55, she went to Italy to do a concert tour of various cities, and that's where she met my father. And one thing or another, she just stopped singing and did not pick up a opera score or sang a note from 1955 till 1972, 73 when we came to this country. And I always wanted to ask her, and then I never did why that happened. But there was that cut that she was just abruptly finished with the opera and anything to do with it.
Well, how old was she when she started? Because she must have been pretty young.
She was born in 25, so she was, 22, 21.
Oh,
yeah, she was about 21 years old.
Was your mother older than your father?
Yes, my mother, 7 years
I was
old.
trying to figure out the age here. Your father was only 10 in the war. All right.
My father was 7 years younger. But it was interesting enough, and I always tell the story to people, when we first moved to this country in the mid-'70s, she started working at a little drugstore soda shop up here in Bellevue where we live. And she was there for probably about a year. And one day, this gentleman walked in and ordered a hamburger, and she was making it. And then he looked at her and said, "Somebody told me that you're Ezio Pinza's daughter." And my mother says, "Yeah, I am." She said, "What are you doing in Bellevue making burgers?"
Yeah, well, I was going to ask the same question.
She said, "I haven't been singing for so many years. I'm at a point in my life that I just can't be going back to singing opera professionally." And so this gentleman said to her, "Have you ever thought about teaching?" And my mother said, "No." And he said, "Well, there's a position open at Duquesne. They're looking for a voice teacher that I know, and we can maybe try to get you in." And they hired her. And after that, she, I think in the long run, she was a better voice teacher than a singer because she knew so much of opera that it was unbelievable.
Well, plus she was bringing, but she was bringing experience. I know what you mean, but she'd actually done it. See, that's the problem with a lot of teachers is they don't actually do it. They just know about it.
Not only did she do it, she lived it with
right.
my grandfather. Growing up, I mean, she lived it with all the big singers of the time, so she really, really knew the art of opera. And so she sang at Duquesne for over 40 years. As a matter of fact, about at the end of April, they finally gave her a plaque outside of her studio. The school honored her with a plaque outside of her studio saying that she was there for 40 some years teaching, which I had been trying to do for some time now. They finally did it, and I was ecstatic and very, very honored that they did that because she brought a lot to Duquesne. She had a radio show there for 25 years called Opera with Claudia, and then she also did opera workshop. She founded the Duquesne University Opera Workshop. So she gave a lot and to the community and to these kids who, they were all kids. One person that comes to mind because he's from Pittsburgh, his name is Kevin Glavin, who had a very, very stellar career in opera, and he's still singing. And that was his only voice teacher. And,
wow.
He's always he recognizes that all the time. Every time he talks to anybody, he says that, and so she touched a lot of people's careers, and she gave a lot back to not only to the singers, but I think to the community of what she learned and what her goals in life were. So yeah, she had a fantastic career both in singing, but I think as much, if not more, in teaching and really spreading her talent, her knowledge of opera to these young singers that, again, today I'm very critical. Unfortunately, people always say, "Oh, you're too critical." And I said, well, maybe I am. But, I went to see Don Giovanni a few years back. And I won't say where performance was, but I saw the performance, and then I ran into the guy the gentleman that sang Don Giovanni a couple of days later. And I said to him, "Oh, you did a very good job." I said, "I'm sure you listened to my grandfather sing." And I gave him a name, and he said, "Who?" I'm thinking,
oh, jeez.
It's like, it'd be like, I don't know, it'd be like going to a tennis match and saying, "Oh yeah, Roger Federer," and the tennis player goes, "Who's that?" Especially Don Giovanni was my grandfather's staple. I mean, that was his role.
Right.
And so if you're going to sing that, but you don't go back in history and look who the singers were and their interpretation, there's something not right there.
Well, I can't believe how you wouldn't want to listen to them. Not necessarily copy them, but say, okay, that worked, that didn't work. Okay, now let me see if I can do what works and, do it my way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my mother, toward the end of her life, said to me one day, she said, Samuele, she said, opera is not an art anymore, it's a business. And partly she's right.
Like everything, yeah.
She sees some of these singers that are singing, 7 different roles, which they shouldn't be singing, and then they sing, in all over the world. They're not my grandfather for 25 years pretty much sang at the Met. So, but it was a different time, a different era, and things change, and you can't keep things the same. So.
When she was touring with him, when she stopped touring, though, was he still touring? Was he still singing?
My grandfather stopped. He retired from the Met in '47.
Okay.
And then, of course, the story was that him and my mother were living in New York at the time, and somebody knocked at the door, and my mother went to answer, and she said, hello, and they said, hi, can we talk to Mr. Pinza? And she said, do you have an appointment? And they said, no, we don't, but we were hoping to talk to him. And she said, well, can I say who's calling? And they said, Rogers and Hammerstein.
Be right back.
They came in and they said, Mr. Pinza, we just did a Broadway show, wrote a Broadway show called South Pacific, and we would like you to star in it alongside Mary Martin. And my grandfather said, well, I'm an opera singer. I'm not really a Broadway singer, but let me listen to the music and I'll make a decision. So he listened and he decided to do it, and it was a success. I mean, he won the Tony Award in '49 for it as Best Male Performer. So,
Big deal. That's a big deal. No, that's incredible.
Yeah, and then he went off to Hollywood and made 2 or 3 movies. One was with Janet Leigh, one was with Lana Turner. I mean, they're comedy movies,
right.
Fluff movies.
Well, he's got. I think he's in the. What do they call that Chinese man's Chinese? Where they put the handprints on the.
Oh yeah, he's there. Yeah. He was on the cover of Life magazine in 1950.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going. I got to ask the question. His daughter though was flipping burgers in Bellevue. That was obviously a choice that she had made. She didn't have to.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, and you make another good point. Go ahead.
I don't know if she got tired of the opera world and she just had enough for it after.
Well, it's much the opera world as much as I hate to say it, but Daddy's bucks. Let's be honest.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. Who knows what? And she just married my father, and they actually eloped. They got married in San Marino, which is in Italy, but it's a principality. It's not considered Italy. That's where they got married, and they were happy. And then when my younger brother was born, he had cerebral palsy, and they met some people in Bologna, and they said, you should go to Pittsburgh at Children's Hospital. They might be able to help you. So they moved here. I don't think with the idea of staying here forever. I don't think that was the idea. And then, as I said, my mother started, this teaching at Duquesne, and she went to Pitt. And one thing led to another, and they never left. And so both of them passed away here in Pittsburgh. So that's kind of.
And what did your father do?
My father got he owned a farm in Italy.
Right.
So he had a degree in agriculture. But when he came here, of course, first of all, he didn't speak English. Like I didn't speak English, and there was no farming in downtown or Bellevue. So he worked. He got a job at U.S. Steel Supply in the North Side, working as a crane operator. And then he retired early in his life. He was in '87, and he took over my mother's. My mother had a school in Italy. He took over as the coordinator for that, and that was it.
Ah.
And they did that, and they went to Italy every year for 32 years. The 2 of them and my brother, and she again had many singers who are singing all over the world even today that went through that school. And,
Does it still exist?
No, the school was when my mom passed. That was it in 2017.
Because she was. I figure she wasn't there actually teaching them because she was here, but she was just coordinating. I'm surprised somebody didn't want to take over.
No, she went there every year to teach.
Oh, really? Oh.
Oh yeah, 6 weeks. Yeah, and she was a draw. So when she passed,
I got you.
Yeah, so it just went dormant, and that was it. So, but. So yeah, it's funny though that whenever I was growing up, and even in my 20s and my 30s, whenever I would go places with my mother, I was never Samuel. I was always Claudia Pinza's son.
Gotcha.
So that was interesting. I always thought that was interesting. I was always introduced as that. People always knew me as their son, or my grandfather. This is the grandson of Ezio Pinza, but never by my first name.
You know what?
Whatever. But
I don't think I ever asked you that. Have you? You obviously knew your grandfather.
No, he died 2 years before I was.
That's why.
He died in '57. Unfortunately, he had a bad heart back then. If it was, today, he would have been cured, no problem. But back then,
it's amazing because it isn't. When you step back, it's not that long ago.
No.
And how much things have changed for better and worse, and depending on what topic we're talking about. But
sure. Look at my father. He was living in without lights during the war with candles, and he died with an iPhone.
Yeah, the craziness.
So look how much that changed in his life, what he went through.
Now, did he talk a lot about his father at all to you?
A little bit, but not as much. Well, yeah, actually, I should say now, yes, because my grandfather on my father's side was the head of the Bologna train station, so he had a lot of things going on, especially during the war. He saw a lot of soldiers coming back and forth, especially during the retreat, the famous Russian retreat, where the Italians lost 100,000 frozen to death, retreating from Russia. That was, there's books written about.
Oh, that's interesting because they pulled them back then before they all got captured. I take it.
Yeah, and they were so ill-equipped that they all froze to death. 100,000.
People, again, it's one of those little chapters of the war. When you think the Eastern Front, you think Germans, and then obviously they took the biggest wallop of it. But them and the Russians definitely.
Right.
But so did the Italians, and so did other nationalities that fought on there.
Yes, because the Italians were the allies. It was a tripartite. Italy, Japan, and Germany.
Yeah, interesting. Now he obviously didn't come over to the United States. Your grandfather on your father's side, or your grandfather on your father's side.
No, he passed away in Italy. No, the only people that came here was my parents, and then my grandmother on my dad's side came over for a while to visit, and so did his two brothers, but they never relocated. They always went back to Italy.
Okay.
I think it'd be hard for some. I think my father. I think it was hard for him to leave Italy because he was already in his 30s to leave and come here, and I think it was very difficult for him to do that because it's such a different lifestyle. Italy to the United States. I mean, sometimes I have a hard time adjusting still to, even though I've been here practically all my life. It's just such a different lifestyle. That the two, like in Italy we have the thing of the cafe. We go to the cafe, the bar. Here a bar here is something. You go
completely different.
Exactly. In Italy, as you know, you go to the cafe, you have a cappuccino, you have an espresso, you have a brioche, whatever, and then you talk to your friends. It's a whole. I mean, there's been movies made about that lifestyle.
Right.
So there's certain aspects of Italy that I dearly miss. But what do you?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is actually a really good, interesting conversation. I'll tell you why. When I was in the military, I lived overseas for 6 years. I was over in the Philippines for 3, and then I was over in Japan for 3, and that was 6 straight years. I came back to the States in that 6 years one time, but I think maybe because I was on a military base, it wasn't completely foreign. When you're on base, it's a little America. But when you went off base, you were in a different country. And, I would definitely have struggled to live in these countries, but whether it was the language, the processes, the healthcare. I mean, everything's different. It's not to say they're living, that's not to say it was, substandard or better or worse. It just was different. And, I'm the honorary consulate, and a lot of people are trying to get their dual citizen. I keep wanting to know, why do you want it if you're not going to go live there? That's number one.
Right.
And number two, I think
status.
people, right, well, absolutely, it's a status symbol. But I'll throw something else at you, and this is an important one. I think when people go on vacation, whether it's in the United States, whether it's Italy, whether it's Hawaii, whether it's wherever, when they go on vacation, they see the place they're at very differently than the people that live there. And I don't think people understand that.
Oh, of course. I mean, for someone from this country to relocate to Italy and work there, I think it would be almost impossible because the work relationship is so different in here. The work, that I don't think that most people that live in this country could function over there just because it's such a different way of life.
Right.
And when you're on vacation for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even a month, for example, if you're on a timeshare or whatever, it's one thing. But if you live there and you have to go through that bureaucracy, that everyday thing that you're not used to, it's a completely different thing. And it is very different. But at the same time, when you do go to visit a country, whether it's Italy or France or wherever you go, you should understand the culture. You should
Absolutely.
just not go
Make the effort. Don't be
there.
Right.
Just be a tourist. You should learn a little bit about the culture, or at least learn a little bit about what the history of Italy is, because the Italians. Italy wasn't Italy until the Risorgimento in
1860s, right?
1860, right? And the Italian language, the one we speak today, wasn't really diffused throughout Italy till 1958 when television came upon.
Right.
In southern Italy, most of the people only spoke dialect. They never heard Italian. So in Italy we have over 20 some dialects. And if you go from one city to the next, you can't understand it. If I go from Bologna to Venice, which is not that far, I have no idea what they would tell me in a Venetian in a dialect.
That's right.
So you have that component of it too, but you should understand the culture and where they came from, and how Italy was overrun by practically every other country in the world. That's why you have so much different architecture, so much different things. The Spaniards were there, the Bourbons, the Austrian Habsburg Empire controlled all of northern Italy for many, many years until
the French were there.
Yeah,
Then
exactly.
the Ottomans were down in the south.
Exactly. So it's a whole different. And of course, then you have the south and the north, the schism or the schism that you still have today.
Yeah.
Because you have people from the north. They say, oh, they're from laggiù, meaning they're from down there.
Right.
And you still have that. And some people, consider, there's a movie which is a famous line. This person gets demoted, and they say, we're going to send you to the south. He lives in Milan. So we're going to send you to the south, demote you. And he says, where? Bologna. And Bologna is nowhere near the south of Italy. But I'm just saying that's how the difference.
By the way, is that movie Benvenuta al Sud or something?
Yeah, that's the movie.
That is a fantastic movie.
Fantastic movie. But again, you have to understand the culture. When you go there, understand the culture. The Romans, what did the Romans do for history? It's
right.
Unbelievable. Some of the roads that we drive in today in Italy were built by the Romans, and they're still there. Cars go on them. It's not like they were asphalted or restructured. They're the same roads. So there's a history in Italy of all the artists, just like there's a history in Paris. With all the people that went through Paris. So there's a history in Italy and Rome, the Eternal City, Venice, why it was built in the water. People should understand why Venice was built on water. What crazy person would build a city on water? And it was done because they were always being invaded by Germanic tribes up in northern Italy. But they found out that the Germanic tribes hated water. So they figured, if you build a city on water, they won't bother us, Little things like that you should understand before you visit that country.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I'm also a big proponent of, look, you don't have to be fluent in the language. But if you want to say, I'm Italian American, then learn something. Even if it's hello, goodbye, how are you, I'm fine. I don't care. Something of
the culture and something of the language so that you can at least interact just a tad.
And that's why they changed their citizenship law. People are angry about this, and I'm not angry about it.
No, of course not. I hear all the time, I went to Italy, nobody spoke English. And I look at them and I say, well, if everybody came from Italy here, do you think they'd say anybody speak Italian? They're not supposed to.
That's right. That's their country. That's right.
It's their country. So, you should try to speak a little bit of Italian if you can. If not, it's okay, but at least make the effort.
And unlike the French, they'll appreciate when you make the effort.
Oh, yes, exactly.
They won't beat you up. You don't say it right, that's okay. They'll help you out. Right.
Exactly.
But no, that's absolutely fantastic. And but I want to go back. But by the way, I want to go back real quick to that law, because what the law says now is, and again, there's some other subtleties, but generally speaking, it's if you don't have a parent or grandparent who was born in Italy, you basically can't get it from the great-grandfather and beyond. Because that was the problem. You had people that were 4, 5, 6 generations removed saying, I had a great-great-great-grandfather, and then they're coming from countries that they have no intention to go back. They have no intention to learn a language. They just want the passport. And so what's happening, they're inundating the consulates with my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And finally, the Italian government said, we can't do this. There's so many people overseas that are, quote, Italian citizens that, how they don't have a clue what's going on in the country. They're so far removed. So they tightened up the laws.
Yeah, and I agree with that. You need to, especially now in Italy, you have all this it's inundated by these, people from Albania.
Yeah.
They're coming from Africa.
And they're not assimilating.
No.
They don't even want to assimilate. They just want the government checks. They want a passport and a government check. That's what they want. Sound familiar?
What is it? 63 million people in an area just bigger than Florida. Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. It's
It's
not sustainable, and I think they need to not be afraid to clean up. That's the other thing. One of the legacies, I think, of the Second World War was the minute a country says, you know what, we need to clean it up and make it our own. You're these. You're bad. You can't do that. It's like, no, it's their country. It's kind of like what you said before. I was in Italy and they didn't speak English. That's their country.
Right, exactly. Why should they speak English?
Right.
But sometimes people wear blinders and they only see front of their nose, and that's it.
Well, that's exactly right.
At the 19th of June, I'm doing a talk here in Bellevue at Assumption Church, and because I do a series called The Hidden Gems of Italy, because I got tired of people only going to see Venice, Milan, Rome, and Naples, and so I put up I have a four-part PowerPoint presentation on the north, the central, the south, and Sicily. Talk about what hidden gems there are as far as cities and places to see. So I'm doing the next one on the 19th at 7 p.m. As I said, Assumption Church in Bellevue. So I get a good crowd, and people are really interested, especially people that travel to Italy. They enjoy the idea of seeing things that maybe they don't know.
Now, let me ask you a question before I let you go here. Do you have a link or a website where people can go learn more about you and follow this and find out when these events are and when you're going to be speaking?
Unfortunately, I don't, but I should make one up.
Come on, Samuele.
Okay,
Cosa fai?
I'll make one up.
Hai bisogno di farlo. Subito.
Okay, yeah. I will, because as I said, I've given this presentation to numerous organizations already. So,
well, I'll tell you what, if you send me the details, what I'll do is I'll put it right down in the description so everybody can look down in the description. I'll provide the details, and if you're in the Pittsburgh area or going to be passing through around that day, please stop by and you'll get to meet Sam and share some stories.
Very good. Steve, thank you, and maybe we'll do it again for a third time.
We damn sure will, Sam, because I never get bored. Hey, listen, you take care of yourself. God bless you. You stay healthy. And if I can make that, I'm actually going to try and get over there on that date. So send me the details for that, and I'll share that. In the meantime, Sam, you have a wonderful week. Everyone else, thank you for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you when we see you.